this story might end up being one of the most fucked we cover this week, frankly. Because this might be the start of Trump disappearing immigrants, just sending them somewhere and refusing to give answers to the public as to where they've gone. They could be in a prison somewhere, they could have been dumped off in the desert, dumped in the middle of the ocean, who knows? We don't. Donald Trump has been accused of essentially disappearing an entire plane of migrants. There have been accusations that he sent them to South Sudan, but Trump literally refuses to answer. And that's where we're at now. Like, this has become quickly a massive scandal. Obviously, he's been disappearing citizens since his first term, but, like, this is a big deal. Like, lawyers are getting involved, and people are, like, they're going after Trump here, because many of these people who are now unaccounted for and missing had lawyers, you know, they had legal representation, they had families, and this is not something that Trump's going to be able to just sweep under the rug entirely. People are talking about it. And so here we are now.
Breaking news from a federal judge in Boston, the latest of several to say the Trump administration could be violating court orders. The New York Times came out with a story shortly before airtime. A Burmese immigrant apparently put on a plane bound for South Sudan or Myanmar. The government's lawyer claims the second. The man's lawyer says the first. Judge Brian...
We literally don't know. Like, there are multiple conflicting reports as to where the plane went and is headed, so, like, we actually don't know. There are more... It's a situation right now where Trump refuses to answer, like, the Trump administration refuses to answer. We don't know where they're sending this plane of people. And it violates court orders, because once again, these are people, in many cases, whom there are literal court orders saying you cannot deport them. Trump does not care, because who can make him care? Who can hold him accountable for crimes he commits? They've literally found him immune to all crimes he commits while in office. The Supreme Court decided this for him before he won.
Brian Murphy threatening to hold officials in contempt, warning the administration, and it apparently violated an order he issued in April, barring this person's deportation without first giving him time to challenge his removal and ordering officials to locate the plane. Quoting now from the Times courtroom account, quote, during the hearing, Judge Murphy ordered a lawyer for the Justice Department, Elianis N. Perez, to notify everyone involved in the flight to South Sudan, from the pilot of the plane to officials in the Department of Homeland Security, that they could face criminal contempt sanctions if his ruling was not followed. He also instructed Ms. Perez to find out exactly where the plane was and whether it could be turned around mid-flight.
I've heard so much ever since Trump won that, don't worry, Trump can't do this or that. There are guardrails that will prevent him. And I've always wondered, like, okay, but what literal guardrails? Is it that, like, if he writes an order or tells people to do a thing, there's just no actual way to feasibly achieve it from his position? Or do you mean he's not allowed to? Because just because he's not allowed to doesn't mean he's not going to do it. There is no accountability, which means he'll just do the thing. Right now, he is actively fighting with the courts. Like, not fighting with, but just defying the courts as he deports people who they've ordered cannot be deported. Zan, I hate to say it, but covering this news is what Trump wants. He's more popular in immigration, and he won't change many minds, so we need to hammer him on the economy where it really hurts him most. Yeah, that's partially true. Though then again, I don't think that this means that I should neglect covering the things that Trump is like, yes, this is what people... Like, yeah, a lot of Americans are Nazi-brained when it comes to immigration. I don't think that means we should avoid talking about human rights abuses just because that makes most Americans happy with Trump. Like, no, this stuff should be talked about. It shouldn't be... We shouldn't have to be quiet about it because most people are happy that it's happening, you know? Like, I get it. I see where you're coming from, but also... Don't you think just acknowledging that fact means that we need to, like, try our best to win people over on this issue? Like, isn't that such a horrific thing to be true? Don't you think we should have to change that? Because, like, fuck, you know? Like, this is bad if people are really fully on board with this across the spectrum.
And Ms. Perez told the judge she did not know where the plane was.
Ugh.
More now on this man's case and that of another person from Vietnam who apparently suffered the same fate. CNN's Priscilla Alvarez and Jeff Zeleny are with us now. There's a lot that is murky about this, and we're just figuring out, Priscilla. But what do we know about why these migrants were allegedly deported despite the judge's order?
Well, John, all of this unfolded very quickly over the course of the day. We initially saw those court filings earlier this afternoon, but this is something that began on Monday and really took off on Tuesday. Here's what the court documents say. There are declarations here from attorneys from of the Burmese national that you're referring to there and a Vietnamese national. But they say, John, that there could be 10 others who were on this flight, they say, to South Sudan. Now, in the case of the Burmese national, what the attorney for that national says is that on Monday, he was notified that he was going to be deported to South Sudan. He's not proficient in English. He was advised or he was notified by ICE while he was in detention of this without an interpreter. And this really set off a chain of events.
Expect a lot of situations like this, by the way. Expect a lot of situations where over the next few decades, we're going to find out countless people were deported, despite there being no due process, being no actual suspicion or legitimate suspicion of a crime, and genuinely a lot of cases where it's going to be people who have a, tenuous grasp on the English language. Those are the people they're going to target the hardest. The people who don't have the language or the voice to reach the majority of Americans with their story. That is who's going to be primarily targeted. And we're going to hear a lot of horror stories over the next decades of what America did over these next 4 years.
Events of his attorneys trying to figure out why he would be sent to South Sudan. He did have a removal order, but to his own country, not to another one. Now, his attorney says that she set up an appointment to meet with him virtually this morning. When he checked the detainer locator this morning, that's essentially the detention system to see where people are, he was no longer there. And when she emailed ICE, they said the officer responded, quote, South Sudan, when she asked where he was removed to. So you can see why there is so much confusion as to where these detainees who just yesterday were in the detention system are now no longer there. Now, the attorneys are trying to scramble to figure this out because even though some of these migrants did have removal orders and could be deported, the question here is where were they deported to? Because if they are sent to a third country, in this case South Sudan, then they would have had to go through a process. They would have had to be notified. They would have had an ability to contest their removal to this country.
What's so wild to me is that we're just sending people to different countries in their country of origin. Like, deportation used to mean you get sent back to your home country. And as awful as that can be, there's some level of, like, I feel like the average person can see that and think that's reasonable. You know? Like, it's an easy thing to logically justify. But how do you logically justify shipping people off to a country that isn't even the one they came from? Like you're essentially facilitating illegal immigration to another country. But all the reason they get away with it is that all American voters want is less immigrants in America. They don't care whether other countries are having their immigration rules broken. They don't care if people's rights are being trampled on. They just want less immigrants here. They've been convinced immigrants are the cause of all the problems over the last 5 decades, 6 decades at this point, and they just want them gone at any cost.
Now, all of that appears to not have happened, which is why we are seeing all of this unfold in these court filings and in the courtroom. I will also tell you.
Yeah, to be clear, by the way, thank you for mentioning that, Dr. Bardock Gaming. South Sudan is currently in civil war with Sudan proper, if I'm not mistaken. And itself is full of strife and constant conflict. Not a safe place to be. Not a safe place to be. You'd be safer being airdropped onto the Fortnite Island.
Tell you, John, the Department of Homeland Security has not publicly confirmed a flight to South Sudan, a place that has been on the cusp of civil war and where the U.S. advises Americans not to travel to because of the ongoing armed conflict there. So certainly a scramble is still unfolding at this hour, John, as attorneys try to figure out where people who they knew were yesterday are suddenly nowhere to be found in the U.S. system.
Yeah, it is confusing. So, Jeff, has the Trump administration made any comment on these alleged deportations? Because this is obviously not the first time they have found themselves in this sort of a face-off with a judge.
As of now, John, tonight, no. The White House has not commented on this broadly. The administration has not either, DHS. And you're right, it is a very familiar story. As Priscilla was just laying out there, we have heard this before. If this sounds familiar, it is. The countries are different. The locations are different. To Priscilla's point there at the end, South Sudan is on the cusp of a civil war, and there is a travel warning against visiting there. So that certainly is one point here. But no, the administration is not responding to this. They simply, this is one more example of how the immigration procedures are operating.
Oh, so no, Sudan and South Sudan are having their own civil war. But previously it was all Sudan. They broke apart through a civil war. Now South Sudan's having its own civil war, while Sudan has its own secondary civil war. It's basically two countries that used to be one country that broke apart after a civil war, now both having another civil war, potentially to split apart into fourths, which kind of makes sense because the maps are very retardedly drawn in Africa. It was not Africans who drew the maps.
Operating in the shadows in many respects, but the events of the courtroom in Boston that were relayed by the New York Times and in the official record show that the judges, one more judge, is increasingly becoming exasperated and angry with the Trump administration, with the DOJ lawyers for their responses or lack of responses. And we're told there is another hearing tomorrow to get more responses to this. So this is very much.
This civil war shit better not make Chad no longer Chad-shaped by the end of it, or I'm going to be fucking pissed.
An ongoing story, John.
All right, we will learn more, no doubt, in the coming hours. Priscilla Alvarez, Jeff Zeleny, we really appreciate your reporting on this. With us now is Senator Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat from Connecticut who sits on the Judiciary and Armed Services Committee, among others. Senator Blumenthal, very nice to see you. So, look, there's many levels to this story. If there was a plane with migrants sent to South Sudan, deporting people to South Sudan, what...
I'm aware, KGB. I just wanted to make a joke about how Chad is Chad-shaped.
What's your response to that? Sending people who aren't from South Sudan, we think, to this nation which is on the verge of a civil war?
If those individuals were on a plane sent to South Sudan, it seems a violation of the court order. Judge Murphy ought to be really angry. His order has been violated, and he ought to consider a contempt of court motion. And no doubt.
I mean, you can't go after Trump, but I guess you can go after the lackeys, but won't he just pardon them? Do you think he even would? Would he care enough? It's hard to say. But, like, yeah, I mean, arrest everyone you can, I suppose. And, press charges for blatantly and knowingly violating a court order after being warned not to do so. You know, like, you follow through on the promise. You can't just, like, say, oh, you can't do that, slap on the wrist this time. Not at this point. There's been too much of that. We gotta lock in and actually hold Trump accountable for the rules he's breaking, not pretend like it's unfair when we hold Trump to the same standard we hold everyone else to.
The plaintiffs are considering it now, but very seriously, violation of court orders ought to be treated with the utmost of sanctions because otherwise the law is dead letter.
Court order aside, and I'll come back to that in a second, why do you think South Sudan as a nation to deport people to if they are not in fact Sudanese?
John, you know, it's inexplicable, except that so much of the lawlessness occurring in connection with these deportations is cruel and dumb. And so the only explanation could be that it was a way of somehow punishing them for being illegally in the country, to send them to a place where they could be easily subject to persecution, torture, killing. And that is the fate, by the way, that they've also imposed on Afghan allies who helped our servicemen and women in Afghanistan, as well as protecting diplomats who are in this country on temporary protected status. And they are now, the administration, threatening to eliminate that TPS status, send them back to the Taliban where they have targets on their back. Cruel and dumb, really inexplicable.
That's actually a really big problem in regards to, like, we fought a war more or less for 22 years, had a lot of local, like, help and a lot of those people had to flee Afghanistan, notably when we dipped out and let the Taliban just take over. And now a lot of those people who like helped America in its 22 years of like holding the country more or less are now being sent back, where many of them literally have bounties on their heads. Like, it's pretty disgusting. I've talked about this before. We've had segments about this before. But, like, this is far from the only example of immigrants being, without any judicial process, just shipped off to essentially a war zone, or at least somewhere where they're very, very likely to get hurt or killed.
Subset of people that are easier to vet, who we have a better understanding of who they are and what they're going to do when they come here, they're going to receive preference.
So you're saying military occupying a country doesn't make it more stable? Well, it has nothing to do with that. It's that those people, like in Afghanistan specifically, a lot of local Afghans helped the U.S. with said occupation because they didn't like Taliban rule. And then once the U.S. left Afghanistan, the Taliban, took over in a day. Kabul fell in a day. And the Taliban put bounties in the heads of anybody who helped the U.S. Anything from interpretation to directions to providing like shelter to providing weapons to providing blankets even. You help the enemy, you're going to face consequences. And a lot of those people got a free ride to America. Not all of them, but a lot of them got a free ride to America during the Obama and Biden administrations. Even during Trump's first administration, it was still happening. And now Trump is deporting many of these people, if not to like South America, to literally back to where they came from, where there is unironically a bounty on their head by the government. It's like, I was being facetious. I cannot imagine how scared anyone who helped the U.S. was. Yeah, it's like, yeah, occupying countries of the U.S. is bad, but also the reason that this happened is we stopped occupying after like a lot of people there kind of got used to us occupying and started to like it and helped. And now the people who now control things are like, hey, all you people who helped the occupation, you're fucked. That's not good. That's not good.
CNN's Larry Madowo now digs into the reality of what's going on in South Africa.
White South Africans, many of them farmers, enter the American dream.
Yeah, I did a whole segment about this and like the origin of the white South African farmer genocide conspiracy theory. It's not true, and it originates from, I shit you not, alt-writers on the internet in like 2017.
Some, too young to know, they've also entered an international firestorm.
Welcome to the United States of America.
The U.S. government says it's taking in these refugees fleeing alleged rape.
I don't have anything against them immigrating to America, but what I do find amazing about this is that they managed to pass off a whites-only immigration policy and justify it as like, oh, we're saving people from genocide. Don't worry, guys. Yeah, whites only, but also it's good. We're doing it wokely. Like, literally, you weren't allowed to immigrate if you were a black South African because you weren't at risk of being genocided if you're white. Only white South Africans were allowed in.
Racial discrimination at home.
That's why they've opened the door for them.
Yes, and they don't fit that bill. Those people who have fled are not being persecuted. The American government has got the wrong end of the stick here.
South Africa's president has come to the U.S. to set the record straight and is expected to meet President Donald Trump Wednesday, hoping to reset the two countries' relationship. It was his signing of a controversial land seizure law.
Absolutely insane. Both these stories are happening simultaneously, by the way.
In January that invoked Trump's
so
wrath,
blatant.
allowing the state to take unused farmland without compensation if deemed just, equitable, and in the public interest. South Africa's majority black population still owns just a small percentage of farms more than 30 years after apartheid.
No, it's actually like insane. White Afrikaners make up 7% of South Africa's population and hold like, I think it's over 99% of the wealth in the country. They own the majority of the land as well. Like a lot, like way more than just like half of the land. Like there's such a small minority and holds so much of the power, wealth, and land in the country. There's very few cases where a group so small in the modern world have such exclusive demographic access to power and privilege, while the rest is just completely fucked. Like, usually it's on grounds of class. Like, in America, yeah, if you're, like, born wealthy, or born into, like, a wealthy family, if you're born into the right zip code, you're going to be way more well off than, like, 99% of Americans. But for it to be a line based on race so clearly, it's wild, right? Like, never has there been a more privileged group. And, of course, what group is more perfect for the right to try and make a victim out of than one of the most privileged groups on the planet?
Officially ended, while most are owned by the white minority. There were 36 murders at farms between April and December last year, but only 7 of the victims were farmers, according to police data. But President Trump calls it a, quote, genocide against white farmers.
They're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. It's a genocide that's taking place.
The accusation, partly stemming from this apartheid-era song, made popular again by far-left opposition leader Julius Malema.
Kill the poor, the farmer.
But
AfriForum... I don't know if Trump could even, like, know what that's supposed to stand for, I'm gonna be honest. I don't, maybe, but I honestly think it's just Trump regurgitating right-wing propaganda he's heard. Because this conspiracy got popularized, at least from where I heard about it first, was Lauren Southern and her dog shit documentary about, I think it was called, like, Farmland or something.
The conservative white Afrikaners lobby group won't explicitly say there's a white genocide.
There's a call for genocidal call. People are being killed and people are being tortured. We need to prevent this from going further.
AfriForum is described...
Basically, violent crimes occur, and they claim it's a genocide. Like, generally a genocide is also committed by some, like, entity with, like, a legitimate level of, like, strength, power, or ability to institute a genocide, not, like, random individuals in the countryside choosing to, like, murder people. Like, that doesn't usually make a genocide unless it's, like, so widespread that, like, you're seeing wide swaths of population die. Like, it's really hard for a decentralized genocide to exist. Like, it's a very hard sell.
But the U.S.-based Southern Poverty Law Center, as a white nationalist group, they have the ear of the U.S. administration, but they're not leaving South Africa.
It's over.
At AfriForum, we say our future is in Africa because our ancestors came here more than 300 years ago.
They came
South
here?
African-born entrepreneur Elon Musk has found...
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess, yeah, they came here more than 300 years ago? Yeah, I'm just curious. How long have the Africans been there? I'm just, you know, I'm just curious. You know, I'm just a little curious. How long in comparison?
And the accusations against his homeland, frustrating locals.
I think they are lying. There's no genocide in here. Elon Musk is overhyping the situation. There's no such as genocide.
We mustn't mischaracterize things as a genocide. There's no mass expropriation of land taking place in South Africa. There's no genocide taking place.
Musk reportedly wants approvals for his companies to operate in South Africa.
God, he's such a fucking ghoul, bro. Like, he anti-Muse. It's actually crazy. Like, you know how I'll go, like... Somehow he's hitting him anti-Mew. He's, like, curling his lips down, thus shoving what little chin he has deeper into his neck. It's such a unsettling resting face. He's wemming. Yeah, he's wemming right now. He looks like he ate a bowl of ants. He looks like he's smelling a really bad fart, but still is laughing that someone farted. That's how he looks in this image.
Reportedly wants approvals for his companies to operate in South Africa.
Is Elon Musk invited when you have that face-to-face meeting?
Well, I don't know. They will determine whether Elon Musk is part of it or not.
President Ramaphosa hopes to mend the rift and convince Trump to attend the G20 summit in Johannesburg in November. Larry Madowo, CNN, Nairobi.
Breaking news.
Bro, what the fuck is happening to our country? Unironically, we used to be a real country. Like, even when we did do deportations, and we had shitty, overly strict immigration policy, you could argue that a reasonable person could see said policy as reasonable to the extent that they don't feel the strongest urge to change it. But now that we've gotten to the point where the average American supports what's happening right now on a, on a immigration, in the sense of immigration, like, what do we do? Like, how do we reach the average American and convince them, yeah, this is actually bad? Believe it or not, disappearing people with no judicial process just because they aren't from here is bad. How do you get people to go from cheering for that to thinking, huh, I never thought of it that way? Can you even? I think you can, but man, is it going to be a hard-fought journey to getting people, out of the brain rot of conservative propaganda on these issues in particular. Regardless, though, if you liked what I had to say, found me entertaining, educational, or enjoyable in any way, then please consider leaving a like on the stream or the video whenever you're watching, whatever you're watching. It only takes half a second, and it really, really does help. It's like zapping the YouTube algorithm and forcing it to push my stuff out to more people. The right really benefits from the amount of engagement their rage bait gets, so being able to go the extra mile and support your favorite progressive content creators, not just me, but ideally including me, really does help, and it's as simple as hitting the like button, and if you really want to go the extra mile, dropping a comment as well. In fact, comment down below, bring them back, to let me know you watched this far. Not only will it boost me in the algorithm, but it'll also let me know that you enjoyed the video enough to watch all the way to the end. And of course, if you want to see more from me on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell icon to turn on all notifications so that YouTube actually tells you when I go live or upload a new video. And of course, if you want to see more from me on other platforms, you can follow my social medias linked down below, especially joining my fan Discord server, which is the main hub of my community and fan base. I host weekly gaming events, call-in streams, watch parties, and movie nights there, and announce all my new uploads and streams as well, so you won't miss anything if you join. Definitely consider getting in there. And finally, if you want to support me directly, financially, help me keep the lights on and a roof above my head here at the Xander Hall studio, then please consider donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or support me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, Patreon, or buy some custom Xander Hall merch through the Streamlabs link down below. Regardless of how you support me, though, thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a good one.